Welcome back. It's time now for a check of all the top business news stories, and I'm joined once again by our business editor, William Edwards. Hi, William.
Hi, Tom.
Now, a dramatic start, I'd expect nothing less from you, with warnings from the IMF about a return to the 1930s. What's going on?
Sounds terrifying, doesn't it? The depression, of course, of the 1930s. Well, Christine Lagarde, the head of the IMF, was alluding to that time. She doesn't say that we're going to go through a new depression, but she was warning of some of the factors that brought on the depression of the 1930s, including rising protectionism and isolationism in global trade. Now, of course, this comes as the World Trade Organization is meeting at the moment in Geneva, and there have been tensions between China and the US over tariffs which were introduced in China on Thursday on imports of American-made cars, which of course has rather annoyed US lawmakers. A group of nations have pledged to roll back any protectionist policies which have been put in place since the beginning of the 2008 financial crisis, but these don't include the key players China, India and Brazil, some of the biggest emerging economies.
And there's one brick missing on your list.
Russia, indeed. Well spotted, Tom. They have, in fact, they're going to be accepted formally today into the WTO. Surprising, really, they're the only G20 nation not to be in the WTO already. So let's talk about this a bit more with our correspondent in Geneva, Vicky Morgan, who's joining us now live. Thanks very much for being with us this morning, Vicky. So 18 years in the making for Russia to join the WTO. What's been the hold-up?
Well, 18 years ago, Russia was a very different place. It was just about the Soviet Union, and it still had a little bit of that mentality about foreign trade. Perhaps didn't give it the right amount of importance. They perhaps didn't realize what it means to be accepted into this market and to be able to trade freely within it. So at that time, negotiations were carried out by perhaps a lower level ministry, a lower level secretary from the Ministry for Trade. And as Russia began to get a market economy, as it got back on its feet, it became clear to everybody else in the WTO that this is a very big country, a big market, yes, but also a big country full of oil, gas and wheat. And so did these countries really want to let those goods come and flood their countries? So normally when you get a country joining the WTO, you have the 5 or 6 countries perhaps posing objections. Russia got 60, and it's had to negotiate with each one in turn. So that's why it's taken so long. They've had a lot of work to do.
Vicky, Tom here in the studio here in Paris. Now, of course, the Russian politicians have been making lots of hay out of this deal, and there are some pros and some cons, aren't there, for Russian businesses?
Yeah, you're right. I think some Russian businesses are perhaps a little bit worried about what this is going to do because, as the chief negotiator for the WTO told me yesterday, they've had to agree, Russia has had to agree to let goods and services into its country, and in return, of course, for being able to export Russian goods and services. Now, we hear a lot, perhaps, about foreign countries going to Russia and having trouble doing business there. And so this being able to apply WTO rules will be a boon for them, but it will also, in the opinion of the negotiator, Maxim Medvedkov, be a big boon for Russian exporters. At the moment, they have deals with separate countries, but these deals don't have any weight. So if somebody, for example, says they'll buy some Russian goods and then doesn't pay, there's no way to enforce that. There's no deal and there's no arbitration panel, which there will be with the WTO. So although Russian companies will have to face more competition and therefore have to get more efficient, there will be a safety net in place for them. And so Russia thinks that overall it's worth it.
And very briefly, Vicky, of course, the next big step in global trade is meant to be the Doha round of talks, which is meant to open things up further. Have we heard anything more about that?
Doha is keeping an extremely low profile at this ministerial meeting. Some studies have shown that implementing the Doha agreement could, in fact, lead to adding 3 to 4% to world GDP. So with things the way they are, you'd have thought that people would be jumping on that. However, Pascal Lamy, the head of the WTO, has been saying, at times of economic dire straits, governments tend to become very self-centered, think only about their own interests, and that's exactly the wrong attitude to have when global trade, freeing it up, could really help the global economy. In effect, he's echoing Christine Lagarde's words, saying a return to protectionism will not be a good thing for the WTO, for the world economy.
All right, Vicky Morgan there in Geneva. Thank you very much indeed for bringing us up to date. Now, William, we're going to head to France, I think now, which is apparently on course for a recession.
Unfortunately, yes, according to at least INSEE, which is France's official projection group, and they are expecting a brief recession, not just for France, but for the Eurozone as a whole at the end of this year and the beginning of 2012. For the Eurozone, this is expected to be, down by 0.3% in the fourth quarter of 2011, as you can see there. But for France, not quite so sharp, because, of course, Italy, Greece and Spain, all those badly hit nations by the Eurozone credit crisis, they're all in the Eurozone as a whole. So in France, we are expected to see a light recession, but still, overall, they're expecting growth for 2012.
OK, well, we're going to head to Italy now, and it's one of the worst affected countries by the Eurozone crisis, you were just saying there. And the Prime Minister, Mario Monti, is now introducing some tough reforms. Well, this Friday was a confidence vote, which is being used by the government to force through some more austerity measures.
1.9 trillion euros in debt, Italy has to act now to defuse a ticking time bomb. The government has a plan to balance the books by 2013, comprising 20 billion euros of deficit cuts and a 10 billion euro stimulus package. Prime Minister Mario Monti has already accepted many lawmakers' amendments, sweetening the deal for pensioners and poorer families. The threshold at which pensions are pegged to inflation has been raised to €1,400 a month from €960. And the tax on principal residences, reintroduced by Monti's government, will be reduced for families with children. To compensate, pensions topping €200,000 a year will be more heavily taxed. There'll also be a new levy on capital brought back to Italy after being hidden abroad. The plan has run into opposition. Neither the Northern League nor the unions are convinced.
It would be an exaggeration to say that we are satisfied. We could do more. The issues raised were good ones, but the solutions insufficient to be able to talk about change.
This is not a budget bill, but a robbery of the North, of workers and families.
Despite the grumbling, the government should have no trouble passing the plan. It will then head to the Senate, where a similar vote is expected before Christmas. Rome has to sell more than 30 billion euros of new bonds by the end of January to refinance its debts.
Well, next, the Entente Cordiale has been under a little bit more strain than usual in recent weeks, and some comments now from the head of the central bank here in France, not helping matters.
Yeah, we've been seeing the reaction to comments from Christian Noyer, the, as you say, governor of the Bank of France. He said, yesterday he laid into the ratings agencies. He also suggested that if anyone was going to lose their AAA credit rating, it shouldn't be France, it should be Britain in the line of fire first. Obviously, this didn't go down very well with the UK, especially in the wake of last week's rejection of a Eurozone treaty by the UK. Of course, the rest of the 26 nations in the Eurozone are expected to negotiate on a closer treaty for economic governance.
All right, that's the business. Thank you very much indeed to you, William Edwards. And thanks to you for watching. Do stay tuned, we've got more news coming up here on France 24.
C'est une lutte mondiale que nous menons contre les changements climatiques.
A simple act can change the world. With 1 million hectares planted in 10 years, the Republic of Congo shows the path to follow. Let's join them and plant a better future.